All right. Drive some bows. All of them. All right, so
Bros before bows.
bros before bows. We're back
With the insanity.
with the insanity, which we've added extra levels to. We'll kind of go into that in just a sec. Anyway, kind of start off this video. We might put in some awesome clips, some excitement, things like that, because nobody will really, I don't know if they really enjoy watching us shoot that much. I mean, anyway.
I don't enjoy watching myself shoot.
So we're gonna put some clips in of things. What we've been doing, we've pretty much dedicated the past 2.5, maybe almost 3 months. Like I said before, we switched gears. We're now working on some arrow builds instead of tinkering with bows and bow setups. Arrows. Josh has got, what do you got in your hand there?
This is a Victory RIP TKO 250 spine.
So we kind of dove down the Dr. Ed Ashby rabbit hole. We've kind of done a lot of research. We've tried to film this very video 3 previous times.
A few times, yeah.
3 or 4 previous times. Shot a lot of video of us shooting at distance, kind of comparing things. But what we're doing right now is we're working on FOC, and there's a lot of information out there on FOC, but there's really only one person that talks about the benefits and the in-depth way to get proper FOC, and that's what we found is Dr. Ed Ashby.
Yeah. So we're just like the average guy. We, start building our arrows on our own. There's a lot of information out there, and you see a lot of guys on YouTube with really cool looking arrow builds, wraps, four-fletched arrows, and so forth. And so as we've got into this and started trying to build some arrows, video it, and started learning more, we've kind of switched gears as Kenneth was mentioning, and so it's taken us down a different path. For us, once we started diving into what FOC really is and what it can actually benefit you, we decided that there's really no other way to go than to build what's called an EFOC arrow.
And we'll put up some graphics if we haven't put them up already. If this ever makes it to be something that we post on YouTube.
And there's a lot of guys out there that will talk about FOC and throw out numbers, and so that's kind of why we've dug deeper to find out what it's all about. And like I said, once we started figuring it out, learning more and more about it, you really want as much FOC as you can get in your arrow.
As you could possibly get. And also, like we talked in the past, is we want a fairly flat trajectory too. So that takes some research, some testing, and some time. And actually over the past 2.5 months, we've been doing that. Nothing but that as far as our archery stuff, right?
So this is one of the arrows that we've decided to go with. We've been working with the X Impact arrow. This one's actually a little bit lighter per inch, grains per inch, and that's why we're going to be testing it today. As light as possible with your arrow shaft is key to getting as much FOC as you can.
And we've scoured arrow charts from all that we could pretty much find, all the manufacturers that we found out there, and actually this is the one that came up with the lightest 250 spine to date that we have found. So if you found something lighter than 9.0 GPI, isn't that what this one is?
Yeah.
As far as a 250 spine, and there's a reason why we're shooting a 250 spine. That you can get different shafts to spine, but there's a combination of why we had to go with a 250 spine. And number one, we're shooting 80-pound setups. Number two, we're using a lot of point weight, which we'll talk about the process that Dr. Ed Ashby kind of lays out on how to build these arrows, and we're actually going to do that for this video. It might turn out to be a series of videos.
Most likely. There's too much information to really cover in just one video, and it's hard to even compile enough to just kind of give you a brief synopsis of what we're going to do. If you're really wanting to know how to build an arrow, a lethal arrow, he's the one to go to. So, and there's tons of information. It's out there. It's all over the place of his research. He spent 30 plus years doing this research. So what he has to say about building a lethal arrow is something that every bow hunter should take note of.
And I'm glad you said building a lethal arrow, because what is the main point to all that we do?
We want to be lethal.
We want to be lethal. And why? I mean, not to be like evil, angry, lethal. It's ethical to be as lethal as possible. As a hunter, you want to remove all chances that you maim, wound, or you lose an animal, right? So that's the number one reason why we put the time in, we research and do these types of videos, is to kind of help people find this information that it's not that easy.
No. Part of the reason is it's kind of off the mainstream. There's a lot of, I want to say mainstream, there's a lot of what bow hunters are doing these days that's driven by archery. Archery in general is different than archery hunting. Target archery 3D, you don't necessarily need to utilize some of these concepts as heavily as you want to with hunting.
Though some of them can transfer.
Exactly. But it takes a lot of effort to do this. So
not only that, but so you said there's influence on archery or archery hunting. A lot of influence is industry.
That's right.
And some of the things that people are selling might not be what you want, might not help you be as lethal as possible or as ethical as possible as a bow hunter.
That's right.
So that's the main reason why we do this. So Dr. Ed Ashby, and this is a quick summary of the information. To build these not high, but ultra or extreme FOC arrows, to build these arrows, he recommends, number one, you find out your total overall weight that you want.
And to kind of have an idea of what kind of weight you want to use, it takes a little bit of figuring, some calculations. We've talked about the gold. I don't know if we put anything out. Gold Tip has a.
That was in one of the videos that we
cut it out. So Gold Tip has an FOC calculator on their website, and when we say EFOC, that's extreme front and center, and the recommended is 19% or higher.
Or higher.
And so you kind of start there, and then start throwing numbers in the point weight, the insert weight, and try to get to where you think you're gonna where you're gonna be 19%, and make that as your goal. You have to take into consideration your draw length, what your estimated arrow length is going to be, and we're going to kind of go through that today too. Don't get set on my arrow is going to be this long, and this is what I'm going to do with it, and I'm going to put this on it. Kind of be willing to be flexible with some things. You may not have the flashiest setup out there or the trendiest setup, but what we're going to show you, what we're going to talk about, is going to get you a lethal setup.
That exactly. So, step number one in his process is find out the total weight. So what's the total weight of this arrow, Josh?
Total weight of this arrow, the way I have it set up right now, is 577 grains.
And that's a complete entire
Full-length
shaft.
Yeah, and so that's where you're going to start. Once you figured it out, you've bought, and we'd recommend buying 2 or 3 shafts. Don't go out and buy a whole dozen. Maybe if you can only get them in a half a dozen, buy a half a dozen. Just because you're going to be toying around with it, and it may not be what you end up with.
Exactly.
Where you start is not necessarily what you're going to end up with.
So what we're going to do today is a process of making sure that this arrow setup, the spine is correct. And the reason why we're doing that is we want to achieve perfect arrow flight. And that's another one of Dr. Ed Ashby's points. And he actually prioritized the points in this graphic that I'm going to put up here. So achieving perfect arrow flight is finding out which spine is going to work.
With the arrows and insert, there's a lot of different systems out there. You can go with what the arrow manufacturer has, but we ended up with an Ethics Archery insert system here.
So in this process, what we're going to do, and we actually just shot these arrows at 20 yards bare shaft. And that's the process. And what that will do is, as long as you know that your setup is tuned, you have a tuned bow, which if you want to know how we do that, there's several videos. We've got a couple videos up, and see how we make sure that our setup is tuned.
Yeah, and go ahead and cross-reference those videos with what other videos you can find on the web.
Yeah,
there's plenty of information about tuning.
So after you know that you've got a tuned setup, then you start shooting these full-length shafts, bare shafts, at 20 yards is what we did today. And if they consistently impact to the right, which you would expect it to, that means you have a weak shaft. What you want to do is start off with a weak shaft, because you know you're going to shorten that length. Now by shortening the length of the shaft, you increase the spine. You stiffen the spine.
Yeah. So, and many of you may be wondering, how does that work? Your spine is measured. How do you change the spine? Well, they measure spine at 28 inches. And so once you start with a different, so this shaft is 30.5 inches long. So it's not going to spine the same because it's longer. So as we shorten it down, the spine will stiffen.
And so what we expect in this process as we take length off of this arrow is that those right-sided hits will start to drift closer to center line. All right, so we'll see if that happens today. I'm pretty sure it will. Yeah. We've done it before and it has, but we're going to do that today with this shaft.
Yeah.
All right.
So we've shot a group, and they're consistently hitting to the right of our center line, and we've got it set up. Now Ed Ashby recommends cutting 1/8 of an inch at a time.
Yeah.
We've gone through this process with other shafts of similar spine, so we're gonna jump ahead a little bit. We're gonna cut a half inch.
Yeah, we know it's not going to spine just yet. And so at 20 yards, once we get it close, what we're going to do is we'll step back to 40 yards and we'll shoot bare shafts at 40 yards, as long as the wind lets us.
Yeah.
All right.
Explain what we've just done.
So we went out and shot. We shot at 20 yards and they looked like they were pretty close. Then we stepped back to 40, shot again, and it was considerably hitting to the right. So we need to take some more off of our shaft. And we, like I said, we mentioned before, we know we're going to have to take some off. So you'll notice that as you start at close range, you'll start getting closer. You might be even close when you start, but when you step back to 40, if you've got a weak spine, it'll be very evident at 40.
Yeah. Okay, so we've kind of got a target set up like we've done in the past with our walk back tunes. You want a vertical line. This line needs to be plumb. And so I've shot, and we're not worried about our left to right or our up and down. These are obviously coming in at different elevations, but we're watching left to right, and these look like they're coming in pretty consistently. That's a weak read at 40 yards. This is after taking an inch off of this arrow. After a half an inch at 40 yards, I was missing the target. So as we get shorter and as the spine stiffens up, you'll see it come on.
40 wasn't cutting it. So what are we going to do next?
So I'm just going to go ahead and cut off. We're going to cut off another half inch. We're pretty sure. So we tested these with the X Impact 250 spine, and we ended up with a 28-inch arrow with a little bit less point weight. So we're pretty sure we're going to be getting down to that. If you have no idea where you're going to end up, make sure you're cutting smaller increments. That way you don't overshoot and end up with a stiff arrow, because you can't add length back to your shaft. You can add more point weight, but you have to add a lot more point weight to compensate for a stiff shaft. You'll end up with a really, really heavy arrow, basically. So target, little increments, and get where you need to be.